Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-dum, ba-da-bum. Ba-da-bum, bum, 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 bum. Ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Rolo's Rants. I am Rolo, the Puerto Rican pistolero, as always, here, bringing you the latest hits of what is going on in the world every week in politics and the Second Amendment and extra stuff, depending on whatever I want to talk about. So, glad to have all of you here this evening. I see 24 people. Sorry for the late start. I just literally finished Fallout's first season on Amazon Prime. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to start the show with it. We'll let people get in. I'm obviously going to talk about, the news of the day, which is what's going on between Iran and Israel and the strikes going on there. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Patriot Act and something that I just saw with the Chinese Communist Party, which is going to be pretty interesting to talk about. But let's get it started. So as many of you know, last night, Iran fired an unprecedented missile barrage, missile drone, and ballistic missile, cruise missile barrage at Israel. According to most reports, Israel was able to down 99% of the targets with help of the United States military. Of course, Greg the Goblin with the $20 super chat. So that's where we will start the day. For those of you that do not know what is going on and have been living under a rock for the last few months, Israel was attacked by Hamas from Gaza on October 7th of last year. More than, I believe 1,500 Israelis were killed. It was an unprecedented attack. It was, on the level, especially for a country like Israel, worse than September 11th. And Israel began a ground invasion of Gaza, which they have been continuing since. Iran has been backing a lot of militias throughout the Middle East, attacking American and Israeli forces. The Houthis have been firing cruise missiles at shipping in the area through the Red Sea. So this has been the conflict. Iranian proxies have not been anything new. They've been doing this kind of dirty work since really the war in Iraq and the insurgency that ensued after the war in Iraq. So, the Iranian Republican Guards have always kind of done this stuff. And it really has been Israel's modus operandi. And happy early tax day, $5 from Ad Victoriam. Here's some money for your beverage of choice. It's been coffee lately, so I appreciate that, Ad Victoriam. What's going on? Bruce, I see Willie here. Apollo, Matt, Charles Devane, CDV, Jimmy the Kaz, Hokies. Haven't seen Hokies in a long time. Good to see you, bud. Ad Victoriam, Comic Misconceptions, and The Wayfarer. We got 32 people here on YouTube. We got 3 on Rumble, and we got a Soul Survivor over there on Kick. It's good to see everybody hanging out tonight. So this is the long and short of it. I'll go into kind of the deeper political ramifications and kind of where I could see the conflict going. Kind of I've talked a little bit about what war with Iran would be like. I'll kind of recap that and kind of go over that a little bit. But let's start kind of with the straight news on everything that occurred yesterday. So this will be probably a little bit lengthy here from the war zone. So let's do this. Boom. Iran's why? Well, first of all, why did Iran fire a retaliatory strike in the first place? So this is kind of where things get complex. Obviously, you guys know where I feel about world conflict and getting involved in things and U.S. non-interventionism. I'm pretty big on that. There's a lot of different complications with this conflict in particular that kind of compromise the U.S.'s situation, and kind of sometimes you're stuck with the choices that you've made in the past, and you have no choice but to become a part of the problems that you've created. And the U.S. has created a lot of the problems in the Middle East. So unfortunately, we're partially responsible for a lot of them, and maintaining world order, as much as it sucks and it's not necessarily fair. That's just kind of the way it is. And we've been dealing with the Iranians for a long time as well. The nuclear deal was awful. We've kind of contributed to we've contributed to what Iran is today. Let's be honest, from the, kind of the installation of the Shah of Iran back in the day. If you want to look into the history of that, and kind of being a state that was manipulated by, kind of U.S. government forces and the CIA for a long time. It was a stable country. Persia and Iran were always pretty fruitful societies, so it was sad to see the Ayatollahs and the extremists take over Iran. Unfortunately, it was a consequence of, a lot of U.S. foreign policy and, the weakness of the Shah at the time. And, they took over. The Ayatollahs took over. There was the Iran-Iraq war that went on during the 80s. We funded Iraq at the time to kind of make up for the mistakes that we made with losing Iran in the first place. And it is that's kind of what we've seen. We know what happened with Iraq, with Saddam Hussein wanting to take Kuwait. Ironically enough, Kuwait in this conflict has kind of told the U.S. to Pakistan that, no overflights or anything like that if they're dealing with Iran. So it's kind of crazy how all these things work out, that, you know, in one hand, you can save a country from invasion, and then, you know, a few decades later, they will basically tell you to pack sand. But that's the world of geopolitics that we live in today, and how complex everything has been, and how a lot of this does tend to, you know, we eventually deal with the problems that we created in the first place, and that just comes with the territory, and it has for decades, and that's really all of history, isn't it? You can always point back to something that caused the initial issue. So you get to the point where you try to solve the problem once and for all, or do we allow it to continue? That's always the question that we need to ask ourselves, and that, you know, we kind of see here today. So let's just start with straight news, and then we'll talk about kind of what I think. I'm sure there'll be different scenarios here. So this is from the War Zone. Always a good website if you want to get your military news and things like that. And obviously it is sponsored by the military industrial complex, General Atomics. Oh man, here we go. And you know, it is apropos. I will say this, I'm going to interject this a little bit. It is apropos that, you know, we talk about, you know, military industrial complex, things like that in the, you know, after watching Fallout, it is pretty apropos, but we'll go through here. This is a little bit different. Iranian authorities have announced that they have launched a large number of missiles and drones from their territory at targets in Israel. Israeli officials subsequently confirmed their claim. The attack is in retaliation for an Israeli strike on a consular building right next to the Iranian embassy in Syria's capital, Damascus, on April 1st. The entire region has been on edge since, as you can read about in the War Zone's previous reporting here. So you can check that out. The IRGC, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Division, launched tens of missiles and drones against certain targets inside Israel. An IRGC statement read, according to Iran's state-run press TV. The IRGC has dubbed their retaliation Operation True Response. There are reports of as many as 100 drones in flight. Now, this is obviously a little bit, earlier. There are a lot of updates. Iran has launched a direct attack from Iranian soil towards the state of Israel. We are closely monitoring Iranian killer drones that are en route sent by Iran. This is a severe and dangerous escalation. Israeli Defense Forces spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said in a statement, "Our defensive and offensive capabilities are at the highest level of readiness ahead of this large-scale attack from Iran. Together with our partners, the Israeli Defense Forces operating at full force to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel." Israel has convened an emergency meeting of its war cabinet in response to Iran's actions. Israeli authorities say that GPS coverage in certain areas of the country will be disrupted as part of its response to Iran's strikes. This is part of efforts to disrupt the guidance systems of the incoming weapons. Exactly when any of these Iranian threats might reach Israel is unclear. The IDF has said that the drones would have to travel at least 1,100 miles, which would take them hours. This distance also indicates that they were launched from well within Iran, given that the shortest distance between that country and Israel is around 600 miles. Staging various launches of disparate weapons to arrive around the same time at their targets in Israel could very well be part of Iran's plan. I don't think that that's how it worked out in the end. This would help overwhelm Israel's extensive air defense network. A number of countries in the region, including Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt, as well as Iran and Israel, have closed their airspaces to normal air traffic in response to the Iranian operation. Iran has begun an airborne attack against Israel. President Biden is being regularly updated on the situation by his national security team, and we'll meet them with we meet with them this afternoon at the White House. His team is in constant communication with Israeli officials, blah, blah, blah. This full scale and scope of Iran's strikes very much remain to be seen. That seems like a typo, as well as what responses might come from Israel and its partners, especially the United States, in the aftermath. Regardless, this is an unprecedented situation that will have impacts throughout the region. This is a rapidly developing situation, and we will continue to update this story as more information comes available. Here is the first update that they had from yesterday. Iranian state media is now reporting that ballistic missiles, in addition to cruise missiles and drones, are being employed in the strikes on Israel. It remains unclear what specific types of weapons Iran has employed in these strikes. Iranian quasi-state media outlets have shared stock footage showing what look to be variants or derivatives of the Fateh 110 ballistic missile, which we can check out here if we want to see what it looks like, and the Shahid 136 kamikaze drones. We've seen those extensively used in the war in Ukraine. So, they look like little Delta wings. So that's these guys. We've seen plenty of them. The Russians are manufacturing them themselves at this point in factories in Russia. The Ukrainians took a shot at one with their own drones. So, and then there's an Iranian ballistic missile right there. Okay. So that's some of and then they had their cruise missiles, which would be kind of something the equivalent of like a Tomahawk cruise missile that we have in the United States, something similar to that. There are unconfirmed reports that some Iranian missiles and our drones are already being intercepted. There are similarly unconfirmed reports that Israel's foreign partners may be involved in these defensive operations. U.S. authorities have publicly pledged this week to support Israel in its defense against incoming threats from Iran and/or its regional proxies. Israel's officials reportedly believe areas in the Golan Heights and an airbase in the Negev Desert are among the primary targets of Iran's strikes, according to the New York Times. A separate report from ABC News says that Iran appears to only be targeting Israeli military sites. Unconfirmed reports say the U.S. government detected the initial launch of Iranian drones from its territory and passed on details to its Israeli counterparts, helping give them advance notice. How this was done is not clear, but U.S. military is highly capable of space-based early warning systems, especially the space-based infrared constellation. SBIRS is primarily designed to watch for ballistic missiles, but is reportedly sensitive enough to detect the much smaller thermal signatures as well. So, yeah, this is, I'll discuss this a little bit more, what I think about this and how it may have been coordinated if they don't talk about this here. Iran's permanent mission to the United Nations has also issued a statement citing Article 51 of that organization's charter, which recognizes the inherent right to self-defense of any country and justifying its strikes on Israel. The matter can be deemed concluded. However, should the Israeli regime make another mistake, Iran's response will be considerably more severe, the statement added. So, from that statement, look, Iran is who they are. They are a theocratic Islamic extremist state that funds Islamic terrorism throughout the world. So they are obviously going to, you can't necessarily predict how they're going to react, but the Ayatollahs have been in power for a long time. So I don't think that they're as stupid as we think they are. Or at least their military is not. Maybe they restrain the Ayatollahs. I'm not, few people know the inner workings of the Iranian regime and how it actually functions and their pragmatism. I think Iran plays the long game in a lot of cases, and they're a little bit more shrewd than a lot of the other kind of Islamic extremists that we've dealt with in the past, and that's kind of why they're the last country standing as far as this axis of evil that we talked about years ago after September 11th. And I think that this was I think what was a prologue to what we could have expected here was their reaction to Donald Trump's takedown of General Soleimani a few years ago in Iraq. I think that Iran has shown that they know. I think Iran's reactions to certain things show that they are biding their time, or they're not necessarily ready for the big time that we think, that we've kind of thought when it comes to offensive firepower. But, I'm not sure. But yes, it is true that essentially because of the money that the U.S. has given to the Iran nuclear deals, the billions of dollars, and obviously the aid that we give Israel, our ally, we have essentially funded both sides of this conflict, which is ridiculous. And in a way, that's why this puts us in the position of the catch-22 that we're perpetually stuck in. It's like we gave this money to Iran. We don't want Israel to go to war with Iran because they will need our help. At the same time, we helped contribute to the creation and the problems that Iran is. So this is kind of the catch-22 because the libertarian isolationist in me is always going to want to avoid these conflicts. I think that this could be a disaster, and I'll go into that in a little bit here. But I'll just interject that for now. That is Israel pulling us into the conflict, or did we pull ourselves into this conflict with our previous decisions? And that's kind of the question that you can always ask. And then what do we owe for the mistakes that we've made? Now, we, the American people, unfortunately, write the checks for the mouth that our government cashes. We write checks with our ass that are government checks with their mouth, or I should say I got that backward. The government writes checks with their mouths that we cash, that the American taxpayer cashes with our hard-earned cash. So I can't say like what the chicken or the egg is here or what the right thing is. I think that we are in a situation now as the American people where all we can do is watch, and we hope the cooler heads have prevailed, and hopefully both Israel and Iran shows some restraint here, and we can move beyond this. Alec Baldwin's finger doesn't miss for $20. Why does Saudi Arabia allow all that junk to fly through their airspace? Well, let's look at a map, because that's always a good question of the Middle East, and then we can kind of see whether that's the case. I don't think it is the case. So no, it's definitely not necessarily the case here. So let's bring this. This is a bigger one. So if we want to look at how the Middle East is, set up here. So we got Iran. Yeah, they don't even have to deal with the Saudis when it comes to that. So, you're probably firing missiles here from Iran, and then you're going to go through Iraq and then over Syria as much as possible. And then maybe through Jordan. The Jordanians did shoot down a ton of stuff yesterday. So the Iranians were obviously firing them across from here. They could go from here and fly most of it through Syria and then try to go that way. Syria is probably not going to bother them. Iraq is not going to bother them at this juncture, the way that, kind of the alliances are set up here. So, and I think we do have to look at it that yesterday, there's two things that you can take from it. It was a master class in air defenses, and it was also Iran, I think, did things intentionally in a certain way. So, I think both sides kind of, it wasn't for show, obviously, because, Israel took a huge gamble. They really did. Now, by all accounts, Israel went after that consulate building because there were several high-ranking Iranian officials that were planning attacks with their proxies. Obviously, you can take intel as a grain of salt. If it's legit, then obviously Israel had to weigh the calculus in that situation. Missiles from Yemen flew over Saudi Arabia. Well, there you go. I think that kind of tells you, Alec Baldwin's finger, that the Saudis can't do anything about it. And they probably tried. But Saudi Arabia also on the western side is not as populated as the eastern side of the country. So it's possible that they just flew over desert the entire time. Maybe they're going over the Red Sea. I would assume that Saudi Arabia tried to shoot things down. We just may not hear about it. So, it kind of is what it is. Sometimes you don't get all those details. I'm sure the Saudis have F-15s and American aircraft, so they probably did shoot down some stuff. And it also depends on what the Yemenis were using and the Houthis. So if they're using drones and things like that, they're going to be really slow. If they're using ballistic missiles, a lot of air defense systems now are able to kind of prioritize targets and, check the, ballistic trajectory. This is how Iron Dome works. Iron Dome is impressive because it's probably one of the best integrated air defense systems in the world. We did contribute a lot to it, as in the United States, to Rafael Industries or Rafael Aerospace. They're an Israeli company, and it's really a layered defense system. So you've got David's sling, I believe it's David's arrow, and the Iron Dome itself, or those are the missiles. So there are different missiles within the system for long, medium, and short range, and they all coordinate with one another with the fire control computers. I believe that there's around a dozen or maybe just under a dozen batteries throughout Israel, meaning, missile batteries. And they all coordinate with a central fire control computer, and they can prioritize targets based on their speed, their anticipated landing site, and just what they think they are. So I would assume that Iron Dome is going to prioritize ballistic missiles first because they're going to be coming at a higher speed and angle, and they probably have higher explosives. And then you're going to look at cruise missiles and then drones after that because they're the slowest threat. And Iron Dome is able to calculate, and I'm sure other air defense systems can do this at this point. It's not unique to that. It just happens to be the system that's gotten the most combat experience throughout the world, where it can anticipate where it thinks ordnance is going to land, and if it thinks it's not going to land in if it's going to land in the middle of nowhere, it won't try to shoot it down. So it will prioritize that to save ammunition, because this is one of the other concerns that we need to have as the United States. Cerberus gifted, my goodness, Cerberus, he's out of control. Where'd you come from? Cerberus is out of here, man. Cerberus is out of here. Look at that. Ad Victoriam, 10 Puerto Rican Pistolero memberships. The Candungueros increase their size. Cerberus just coming in here, dropping it in. Incredible. Thank you so much. Ad Victoriam, Willie, Boba Fetish, Jeremy, Hessian Boy, Wayfarer, Carla, Dirty Jersey, Belligerent, Tazi. Got the gifties. Thank you so much, Cerberus. You are the man. We got more than 50 people watching. It seems like the slightly later start time has been good too, because, lately, kind of the show starts a little bit slow. So if you guys like the 30 minutes, let me know. Maybe I'll just do an intro for 30 minutes and then we'll do the show like that. But thank you so much, Cerberus. That was awesome. I appreciate you. So, Iron Dome is a layered defense system, and it'll prioritize targets. It can see if something is not going to hit something else. But this is also kind of a lesson, and it's something that we've seen in the war in Ukraine, and it's something that we'll have to look at, going into the future. I'm not done with the article, but I kind of want to explain a little bit of this. So you got each Iron Dome interceptor, depending on which missile that you're looking at. I've seen $100,000 quoted. I've seen as low as $40,000 per interceptor, depending on which one you're using. So, maybe one of the shorter range interceptors will be cheaper, but where'd my camera go? Okay. Will be a little bit cheaper. But anyway, let's say $100,000 per missile. You're shooting down Iranian drones that are probably like $20,000 to $30,000. The ballistic missiles are more expensive, but let's say you're dealing with cheap drones and you're spending, millions of dollars per interceptor. It's worth it to save human lives. The problem is economies of scale and manufacturability. So this is something that we're going to have to deal with in the future. And I think that this is a lesson for the U.S. and our allies to kind of learn, which is the need for more primitive weaponry on the side of the U.S. and our allies, because it is awesome that we have the capability to do this. I think in the end, we're going to go through this, and I think the Iranians fired something like 300 missiles, drones, and cruise missiles in total, which is a huge number. That's a massive amount of ordnance. Now, I'm going to guess that they did not try to coordinate those strikes. We'll probably find out, because having 300, projectiles flying into your territory simultaneously is going to give any air defense system a run for its money. So, obviously Iron Dome wasn't alone in this. I read earlier that the U.S. said that we took out something like 80 targets itself. So we took out almost a third. The Jordanians took down a lot on inbound. I'm sure that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force also shot things down inbound. The Israeli Defense Forces with Iron Dome shot a lot of things down. So it's possible that each, through the contributions of all the allies, Israel didn't have to use that much of the Iron Dome inventory that they've got in this situation. And I did see that the U.S., of course, took the opportunity to possibly test our newest surface-to-air missile that the Navy has, the SM-3. So, in a way, this is all... There's a lot more stuff going on here than meets the eye, as usual. But let's carry on. Iranian media is reporting that Iranian strikes on Israel may come in multiple waves. So there you go, with more still to come. So you've got to look at the different weapons that you're using. So a ballistic missile is going to go up into space most of the time, and it's going to go on a ballistic trajectory. So it's going to go in an arc, fairly predictable. And even though speed-wise, a ballistic missile is going at hypersonic speeds, they're not considered hypersonic weapons, so to speak. Even though they reach those speeds, because it is going on a parabolic trajectory, it can take a decent amount of time to go. But I would guess that a ballistic missile going towards Israel probably takes like 30 minutes to an hour, maybe even less, to travel that 1,100 miles. The cruise missiles are probably moving at about 500 miles per hour, so they'll take an hour, 2 hours, hour and a half. And then the drones are moving at like 100 knots, so they'll take like 6 hours or more to get there. So if Iran launched all of these things at the same time, it will arrive in 3 waves, and that would obviously give Israel and the United States time to shoot down everything. And I think that that was intentional, because if you wanted everything to go, you would have launched the drones super early, and then you would have launched everything else. So I personally think that this was intentional. The Iranians, look, the Iranians have to show, and this is part of the calculus that Israel had. They took a gamble on this one. And, they thought, okay, the threat, it is worth it to strike this, consulate building, take the risk that we hit an embassy and really violate international law, because, you're not supposed to hit a diplomatic mission. Let's be honest. So let's take this gamble, and because we think it's worth it. So, I'm sure from Israel's perspective, if Iran doesn't escalate beyond this, and if Israel decides to show a little bit of restraint and be like, oh, okay, the Iranians did shoot at us, and they've been fucking around for a long time, because let's be honest, we can keep going back and forth. Who started this? Who started all this? It'll get that when we'll go back to the beginning of time. Let's be honest, because we can go back extremely far, chicken egg, all the way back to literally the Crusades. And if we want to go back in Israel, and who originally, owns Jerusalem, the Jews in the first place anyway. So, we can go back that far if we want to. But in the current conflict, obviously, the Iranians have been using their proxies to take advantage of Hamas's attack and Israel's retaliation for that. So this has been a tit for tat the entire time. Hopefully now both sides are like, okay, they did some serious stuff. Even though Israel here was able to prevent this attack from causing serious damage, the fact that Iran for the first time fired weapons from their territory, that's a pretty massive move on their part. And there's no doubt that they themselves, this could be a pro-ring strike. It could be a penetration test to see okay, we're actually going to give it a shot. We're going to shoot 300, 300 weapons at them. But we're not going to necessarily put our best effort. We're going to launch it in waves. We're going to go for military targets, and then we'll kind of see what happens. So is this Iran's best shot? I don't know. I don't think any of us will know. If it is, then Iran knows that they got to they're going to have to slow their roll a little bit here, because if that is if that's the best that they can do, then, maybe our air defenses are better than we thought. And the drone storm thing is still something that we have to wait. If it isn't, then, maybe they're waiting to see what Israel does. And they're like, okay, next time we're going to shoot 2,000, and we're going to make sure that they hit at a coordinated time. So I don't know. We'll find out. Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants in Lebanon have also launched their own rocket attacks on areas in the Golan Heights. At 7 p.m., videos and pictures showed Israeli air defenses. I got to turn this off so that we can see more here. So, yeah, I know the ad blocks. All right, so let's try to reload this and see if we can get some of those photos. Okay, it looks like it's not showing it. That's what happens when you use your browser this way. All right. So let's get to where, okay, we already know how the attack played out. Let's go to kind of the after action report here a little bit later. All right. ABC News has said, okay, 150. Iranian forces could ultimately launch between 400 and 500. This is kind of where we're at here. This is all very child. I mean, look, this is geopolitics today. And I think what we can look at, there's a few different ways. I think we've kind of seen enough here. We know that Israel was able to thwart this attack. We know that Iran kind of telegraphed it a little bit, it seems. And now we're pretty much waiting to see what the story is here. Will the IDF try to go back? I know that President Biden has basically said that if Israel tries to go after Iran's mainland now, we're pretty much not going to back them up and get pulled into that. The G7 leaders, met today. So let's see. Okay, here's some of the updates from today. U.S. Navy warships were reportedly involved in the intercepts tonight. Destroyers were moved into position off Israel last week. I did hear about that we had our carrier strike group kind of break apart, and we sent the escorts, which I don't like that, but we sent the air escorts from the fleet much closer to Israel's coast, and we were basically shooting over Israel like right off of in the Mediterranean. This could have been the debut of the SM-3 mid-course intercept capability. This was precisely what they were designed to do. So let's look that up because I'm actually curious. As much as we hate on the military-industrial complex, we got to admit that they do some crazy stuff. So let's see how this works. So this is how the SM-3 missile works, and kind of what we would have seen yesterday. All right. Oh, look at that. No music or anything like that. So whatever, this is the SM-3. This is fired from an Aegis warship. So that would be an Arleigh Burke class destroyer these days. I think we don't have many cruisers left. I think there's only like 4 left in the fleet that are in active duty. So anyway, you get satellite tracking. You got the target going up. It's a ballistic missile. It's going to go into space. It's a multi-stage rocket. So the SM-3 can shoot it down while it's in midair, essentially. And it's like multi-stage. It's a multi-stage surface-to-air missile, so it can go much further up. So, oh, look at that. So KW would be kinetic weapon. So that means it relies on actually hitting that. Look at that. It's got thrusters. It's in space. Like that stuff is crazy. Yeah, that's true. That's how it's always been. That is how it's always been. Comic misconceptions, brinksmanship, and things like that. And we pretty much it gets to a point where all we can do is really pray the cooler heads prevail and that our leaders make the right choices, and that we don't end up in a world where we have to worry about a third world war. Essentially. So, all right. Okay. So this is kind of the final tally for the night. 99% of threats were intercepted, did not reach Israeli territory. Combined figure of IDF and U.S. and allies at work. 30 cruise missiles, 0 made it to Israeli territory. 25 were intercepted by Israeli Air Force fighters outside of Israeli airspace. So I would presume that Israel flew over Iraq or Syria and maybe even Jordan. 120 ballistic missiles. Wow, that's a lot. Just a few struck Israel with minimal infrastructure damage. To Navatim Air Base in the Negev. Base is functioning as normal. 130 drones were launched to Israel. None made it. Other launches from Iraq and Yemen, but none hit Israel. Israel complaining 99% effective collective air defense, an incredible number, even if it's nowhere in the ballpark. If it's anywhere in the ballpark of reality, no damage from Hezbollah barrage. So, I was a little bit. Oh yeah, hopefully we won't have to live in a world where we have to worry about death claws. Yeah, I know that would be a problem if we went there. So yeah, these are Israeli F-15s that were set up for that. All right, so let's talk about it a little bit. What I think this could be. I kind of gave a little bit of commentary going through there, but thankfully, it doesn't seem like there were casualties on the ground or anything, any deaths. I think one young boy was injured. And, that's where we're at. So the question is, where do we go from here? And why would we want to avoid a conflict with Iran? Obviously the U.S. could defeat Iran in a military conflict. There's no question about that. But why would we want to avoid this? What are some of the risks and pitfalls that the U.S. has besides getting pulled into another conflict in the Middle East, which always sucks, especially when we have a commander-in-chief that is senile right now. Obviously, he's not the one that's going to run the war, but I think that seeing how some of the conflicts have been run recently, it calls into question how things would work here. So let's talk about this a little bit. So there's a few, we're just going to game plan here. I'm not a military expert. I wasn't in the military. I'm a student of history. I do know a lot about, about the military. I do a lot of reading. Reading is really my main source, books, papers on defense articles, books on history of the Middle East, things like that. That's really my background. Looking at how previous conflicts have worked out in the Middle East between countries, and obviously the U.S. Expeditions to Iraq and Afghanistan also, kind of illustrate some of the things that we're seeing. But like I said earlier, Iran is kind of the last one standing when it comes to the Islamic extremist states. Here, Turkey's kind of moving in that way. ISIS, obviously, the caliphate doesn't exist anymore, but they're still around. But Iran really is your big bad when it comes to state sponsors of extremism, terrorism throughout the world, and they're the ones that actually believe it. They're the hardcore ones that are that have been sitting around here, and so their capabilities are more than people that we've dealt with in the past. The country is very different. Their history is very different. So, those are the things that we need to look at. So first of all, we need to look at this. We need to look at how this attack was organized. And these are questions that we may never get answers to because there's a lot going on. This is an active situation. Governments aren't going to reveal what they're doing at all times. What the media and governments tell us may be lies because there's a lot of mis and disinformation that's going on because we're dealing with an active conflict. So you don't want to compromise information to your enemies necessarily. But you're also playing the game of politics, which is you don't want your population to lose faith in your capabilities. And everybody's trying to do that. So many wars have spiraled out of control because governments want to control what public perception is, or they don't want to look weak if a government is in a vulnerable position. So Iran has been in a tenuous position for a few years now. The Arab Spring, there's been a lot of civil unrest there for years. The younger population there is much more secular. They've been pushing back against the Ayatollahs. Women there are trying to fight for their rights. There has been a lot of civil unrest there. Something that I think the U.S. should have taken advantage of previously, where we may have had more of an opportunity to help the Iranian people overthrow their government, because from many accounts, they would be more amenable to Western culture and, trying to eliminate the extremism and the theocracy that is in charge of their country. So in an ideal world, that's what we would have done to basically take down Iran. We would have tried to orchestrate a color revolution, so to speak, which is something that, for better or for worse, the CIA and other intelligence agencies, the KGB has done this. I'm sure the Mossad has done it as well, but definitely the U.S., CIA, and the KGB have fomented color revolutions in the past in other countries. And that would be kind of the ideal way to take down the Ayatollahs there, help the people there overthrow their own government. Hopefully a better government gets into place that may be more friendly. So it's, so I don't know. And that's the easy way to do it. And, a lot of this is there incompetence? Sometimes don't attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. Are we playing both sides, or are we just stupid? I don't know. Sometimes it shows a little bit of both. Sometimes it could be that we're so consumed with our greed that we don't make logical decisions. And again, this would be such a segue into Fallout if I wanted to spoil the TV show, but I really don't. And I think a lot of the themes within Fallout as a video game are pretty self-apparent, talking about military-industrial complex, corporations that have too much power, things like that. We can see kind of all of that here as well. Defense contractors obviously making a ton of money from conflicts, governments trying to take advantage of situations. So sometimes, are these decisions made because there's some sort of grand plan, or are we just so greedy that we make bad decisions sometimes, then we have to clean them up later? And that's human nature. Sometimes the chaotic nature of how these things roll out and the cycles that we go in almost seems to point to almost chaos and greed being the motivation, unchecked almost, rather than, some sort of master plan. And that's really what That's really how we have to look at it. Sometimes, like I said, we may never know. Is there a master plan? Is there a group of elites that control everything? Maybe there is. Maybe there's multiple groups of elites. Or it's just all these governments are just vying for control and intelligence agencies are playing games with one another. The way that it's been going on for, like thousands of years of human history, cloak and dagger manipulation, controlling information, subverting your enemies in creative ways. This has been going on forever. So I don't know. I can't answer those questions. I can only give theories like anybody else. And we as individuals can only be prepared for possible consequences of bad decisions made by leaders. That's really all we can do here. And knowing kind of the tenuous position that we're in. So let's say Iran let's go through 3 scenarios here. One was that Iran had to do something. They had to. Their consulate got attacked. Their embassy could have been hit. So even though the Israeli strike was very precise and that didn't happen, from a governmental perspective. So let's take the fact that Iran is an evil country that we dislike out of it. From a political perspective, their consulate got attacked. Their consulate got attacked directly. They'd been using their proxies. So Iran can, in their own way, in their own bullshit way, say, well, we haven't been the ones attacking Israel. Like, oh, this is unprecedented. That's why they use their minions to do their dirty work. So they can try to do that politically or cover within the it wouldn't be the Arab street. We'd call it the Muslim street. So Muslim is the Muslim world's public opinion or anti-Israeli public opinion within the Middle East. You've got to show kind of some strength. So Israel took the gamble. In the past, Iran has never attacked directly. So Israel may have suspected Iran's not actually going to attack us directly. They may not be capable of attacking us directly. They don't have the balls to do it. That was part of the calculus. Or we know that they are not as powerful as everyone thinks. They will retaliate, but they also don't want to escalate this into a massive conflict. Like they're just not ready for it. So Iran has to respond in this situation or else they're going to look weak. And they're going to look weak towards their people. They're going to look weak in front of their allies. So they've got to do something. So in doing something, did they choose the Soleimani tactic, which was when Soleimani was taken out by the Trump administration, the Iranians retaliated by firing ballistic missiles at U.S. military bases in Iraq. However, they intentionally did not hit any targets that would result in U.S. casualties. So it was kind of a token response. It was, we don't want to go to war with the U.S., so we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then President Trump, to his credit, showed restraint by not attacking Iran at that moment. Some people may have criticized it. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that wanted a war with Iran that were very angry about that. But I think that showed a lot of restraint. And again, that was kind of a bold thing. I think Israel may have looked at that and they're like, that was a pretty bold move done by President Trump and it worked out. So maybe the Iranians will do the same thing. Now, obviously, the Iranian response in this case was more unprecedented. They fired, hundreds of missiles at Israel and drones. So, maybe that was part of it. So Iran knows they've got to respond. They give Netanyahu and Biden a call and they're like, look, we're going to retaliate. We can't let this stand. You attacked our stuff, so we're going to respond. However, this is kind of what we're going to do. This is the day we're going to do it. Or we're basically going to say we're going to do it in the next week. Because that's kind of how it seemed. Because for days, we have... For days, we have been waiting for this to happen. We've been waiting for this to happen. And, it's like, well, is our intel that good or is there a little bit more going on? That's why I tweeted earlier, I'd be fascinated to know what the internal politics were here. What phone calls were made, what was known. Was it the intel agencies predicting everything? And we have incredible intelligence between Mossad and the CIA. Were there phone calls made between the Iranian leadership and Israel to kind of say like, okay, this is going to happen. So we're going to, but we're going to make sure that it works a certain way. Was it a probing of Israel's defenses? Did Iran want to fire what they knew would be a big response, but also something that, they're like, let's see what they can do. Let's see what they can do. We're going to fire a lot of things. We're going to fire a variety of weapons, and we'll see what happens. And if we hit, hey, now we know that their air defenses aren't as good. If we don't, well, we do have a lot in reserve. Next time we could fire double the amount, triple the amount, thousands. We don't know how much ordnance the Iranians have. Obviously, when it comes to drones, this is where the advantage of drones comes in. You build a small propeller-driven device that runs just on GPS or some sort of inertial guidance, and you can build thousands upon thousands of them. And they're very cheap. They're slow, which makes them difficult for certain weapons to hit. But you've got so many that you just overwhelm your enemy. And then you can fire your high-end weapons over the top that you don't have as many of and give them a chance to hit. Or either way, it's going to be pick your poison. So, and that's kind of the nightmare scenario that we've been trying to see. We see how the drone war has evolved in Ukraine and in Russia, where both sides are using this. We haven't seen the massive scale drone swarms that we imagine yet. And it's possible that maybe nobody has scaled things up to that amount. And we just haven't seen it yet. It's almost like what we're watching is how World War I played out, because World War I, more so than even World War II in a lot of respects, well, both wars show us kind of different things. World War I shows the acceleration of technology advancing in a short amount of time. So we started World War I with cavalry charges against machine gun nests, and the insanity that was. We started seeing air power introduced. At first, planes were used for reconnaissance. We had balloons. There were zeppelins being used as bombers. And then we started putting machine guns and dropping bombs from airplanes. So that's how the drones started. Drones now we've been using drones for years as the US, but really using cheap drones, trench warfare, things like that. Shotguns are even back in vogue now. Like for infantry, what is the most effective weapon to shoot down a slow-moving flying thing? Well, hey, hunters have known that for years, right? If you want to shoot down a duck, a pheasant, or something that's flying around, you use a shotgun. And now that's the anti-drone weapon. Every squad, infantry squad in Ukraine now has a shotgunner, and they shoot down drones. Holy cow, we've come full circle here again. Drones are the new World War I aircraft. We use shotguns to shoot them down. We've gone backwards now. It's crazy. What is new is old again, and vice versa. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, that a lot of the strategies with drones aren't necessarily anything new. It's just a new spin. And sometimes we forget, our modern weaponry is so capable that we rely on it way too much, when simple guns and unguided weapons and things that are easy to manufacture really can make the difference. Because, we in World War II, we were able to produce Liberty ships, massive cargo vessels, like once every month. We had planes rolling off the assembly lines in days and weeks, hundreds and thousands of these things. That we can't do that today. Now it'll take like a year or two to build an advanced fighter. It'll take years to replenish a lot of the stockpiles of weaponry that we've got. What is being used in Ukraine and Russia now more than ever? It's artillery, unguided artillery, unguided rocket weaponry, tanks, infantry. That's ultimately what it always goes down to, because we can't manufacture in the modern era airplanes, smart weaponry, tanks. We can't manufacture that stuff quickly enough. So this is something that we're going to have to face. So, and this is part of the danger now, going towards what happens if we get pulled into a conflict with Iran. Again, Iran is going to be the most difficult adversary that we've taken on as far as the Middle East, because so let's say Iran is as bad as we think they are, or that we've been said. They are hardcore religious extremists. Everything is on the table. The Ayatollahs know the U.S. and Israel are going for them. We're going for the regime change. We're going for that leadership decapitation. We will not allow the Ayatollahs to be in charge of Iran again. We're going to degrade their capability, take out their nuclear program, all that. We're going to overthrow their government. So it's all in. It'll take months to amass those forces. You're going to need ground forces. Let's bring up the map again, like I did a few weeks ago. because this is very important. So let's open this map actually, because this is a terrain map. So when we invaded Iraq a few years ago, here's Iraq. You can see that Iraq is not that, about half the size of Iran, and it is all flat. It's all flat. So this was ideal tank warfare territory. And there is no country in the history of mankind that is better at tank warfare than the United States. That's just the way that it works. Like, we're the best. The Israelis are really freaking good at tank warfare too. But this is ideal. This is ideal tank warfare. We came in through Saudi Arabia. We had air support come in through Turkey up here. We obviously had Afghanistan at the time. We had military forces there. So we were able to go in. We were able to steamroll. We got to Baghdad in like a week or so. The Iraqi military was done in a couple of weeks. It was a master class in modern warfare. But this is what happens when you deal with an inferior adversary that does not have air support. So Iran will be a different story, because let's say that we had decided to tackle Iran while we were in Afghanistan and Iraq. It still would have been difficult, but we would have had something like 200,000 troops in Iraq, another tens of thousands in Afghanistan. You could potentially invade Iran from two different directions. The Afghanistan direction would be the better one, because you can see that the terrain is not as mountainous. So that would be your easier path to go across these plains to try to get to Tehran and take the capital. Coming through Iraq would have been much more difficult. This is extremely mountainous terrain. So you can imagine that our armor superiority is going to be limited here, but it would have been doable. Turkey was still cool with us. So we would have been able to go through there. We may have been able to take, Turkey controls the Bosporus and access to this is the Black Sea. So this goes through here. This is called the Bosporus. Turkey controls all access to this. So at the time, they probably would have allowed the U.S. Navy to go over here, and we could have made strikes into Iranian territory from there. We attack on three sides. It would be a very difficult conflict, but Iran would eventually fall. There's no doubt about that. We don't have any of this now. We don't. We're out of Iraq, and we've allowed Iraq to become essentially a proxy and ally to Iran. We don't have Afghanistan anymore. We allowed the Taliban to take that back over, but we needed to get out of there. And Turkey is becoming an Islamo-fascist state now. And because of the war in Ukraine, Turkey has blocked all access of military vessels to the Black Sea. So now we have lost all advantage that we would have with forces in the area, capability in the area. Air power alone is not going to be able to take this out. You can see how far Tehran is from ocean access. So we send the U.S. Navy into the Persian Gulf. Okay, Iran knows that this is going to happen. So what's their response going to be? There have to be terror cells in the United States. So I would say terrorist attacks in the United States are completely on the table. They don't have nuclear weapons yet. They've got a lot of radioactive material. They could use that to create dirty bombs and things like that. Let's say that they fire their full load of ballistic missiles and things like that at Israel now. Those ballistic missiles don't have to have nuclear warheads. They can have nuclear material. You can fire radioactive waste and irradiate Israel, and it's almost as bad as having a nuclear weapon. It'd be awful. Israel is obviously a very small country. I can't imagine irradiating Jerusalem or something like this. So these are the things that you have to think about, and this is the calculus that's involved. I don't know, can Iran do this? I would think that they could easily do that, especially if they feel like they're at the point where they're done. Like they are fighting for their survival now, and they are Islamic extremists. They're going to fight to the death, presumably. This is not going to be Iraq where Saddam Hussein is going to surrender or things like that. These guys are going to be these guys, if they are what we say they are. Now, maybe the Iranians aren't as hardcore. They've been talking crap. You can't take them at you got to take them at their word. They've been yelling death to America, death to Israel, and all this stuff for years. So I'm going to take them at their word that they are willing to be as hardcore as we think they are. So they're going to do this stuff. They're not going to care about their economy. They're going to sink oil tankers. They're going to take oil tankers hostage. Global oil prices are going to explode, probably, triple, quadruple what they are now. Even though they shouldn't, the U.S. can start picking up the slack. So this is some of the scenarios that can happen here. So this is just going after Iran. So we're going to have to do an amphibious assault through the Persian Gulf. There's going to be suicide ships. There's going to be all this type of stuff. There's going to be cruise missiles being fired constantly. So there's going to be a buildup. Now, obviously, it's going to take months to amass ground forces needed for a ground invasion. Kuwait doesn't seem like they would allow us to do this. Iraq is not going to allow us to mass those forces. It's going to have to be an amphibious assault with the Marine Corps at this point to do that. You're probably going to do it from down here because this is going to be your shortest strait. So Iran is going to prepare these beaches. They're going to do all that stuff. Now, obviously, the U.S. Navy and the Air Force is going to spend months bombarding this region of Iran and softening their targets, taking hits. There's going to be months of attacks going on before we have enough ground forces amassed in order to do this. So while this is all going on and everybody knows we're going to do all this stuff, and, where global oil prices are going up, all this stuff is going down. We finally get to the point where we're able to invade Iran. We've deteriorated their defenses with our air power to the point where we can amass a ground invasion. We go in. It's going to be like the insurgency all over again in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've gotten very good at dealing with this stuff, but even if we take the lessons learned in urban combat that we learned with, look, our military is kind of the best in the world now to fight against an insurgency. We're going to have a lot of veterans of the GWAT that are in leadership positions nowadays. So we tactically, we're going to know how to deal with an insurgency and terrorists, but it's going to be slow. It's going to be slow. So while this is all going on, we're going to contribute a ton of ordnance here. We're going to be defending Israel at the same time. The U.S. Navy is going to be involved in this. Probably 3 or 4 carrier strike groups it would take. I would say at least 3. We've got 3 now, so I can imagine that in a wartime situation, we're going to have more. This gives Russia and China the opportunity to amass their forces as well. And this is where the greater strategy comes in on this. They could take advantage of the situation. Russia, obviously, look, we're already starting to pull out of the Ukraine situation. Is Russia actually going to invade Europe? I don't think so, but I think that they can try to make a big push. Like, could you imagine if we're knee deep in Iran? Even if the war is going well, it's going to require so much of our attention on Iran that what if Moscow decides to use a tactical nuke in Ukraine to try to end the war? Are we going to be in a position where we can threaten them? Are we going to use nuclear weapons to protect a non-ally? I don't think so. Is NATO going to do anything at that point? Or NATO, would France or the UK be willing to use nuclear weapons because they're the only other ones that have them? I don't know. These are things that you have to think about. If China tries to go after Taiwan, now we're going to know for months if they go after Taiwan because they're going to have to do the same thing that we would do if we try to invade Iran. They're going to have to amass a ton of forces here. They're going to have to take some of these islands, believe it or not, that are only a few miles off of the coast of China are actually owned by Taiwan. They're controlled by Taiwan. So the Chinese may take those islands just to see what the West's reaction is going to be. And even if the Chinese decide that now is not the time to invade, the threat of invasion will force the U.S. to have to act. So we will have to move forces there. We'll have to stretch ourselves thin. And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about beating the United States in a military conflict. It is to use the... you'll have to correct me on this because, I didn't really watch the newer DC movies. They weren't that good. So I've watched them all once, but the whole point of this is really to make God bleed. So you don't have to pull the U.S. into a conflict that they can lose. You can pull the U.S. into a conflict that where we take damage and we lose prestige and we lose our superpower status because we cannot defend everybody at once. And that is kind of what the U.S.'s power has been. We were able to defend the entire world. So when they finally show that we're not capable of doing that, that's when people lose confidence. That's when people lose confidence. So this is the potential threat that we've got. These are the pitfalls that we have here. So this is why we want cooler heads to prevail. It may be inevitable that we go into this and that there's nothing we can do about it. You know, it may be that we've made enough mistakes that we're going to pay the price for it. It could be that this is the Middle East. This is Israel we're dealing with. There may be forces that are beyond our control that contribute to this stuff. I'm not going to get prophetic, but everybody knows that the Middle East is the spot. It is the spiritual capital of every major monotheistic religion, and there are multiple prophecies that deal with the destruction of, you know, the world ending because of a conflict in the Middle East. So it could be that the conflict is going to get out of control because our world leaders are beyond it. Could be some sort of spiritual conflict. It could end up being just another skirmish in the long history of skirmishes in the Middle East. I don't know. None of us know. So how will it play out? I don't know, but this is where it could go. And finally, risk it for the biscuit. We keep looking for political solutions to spiritual problems. Yes. And look, I'm not gonna sit here and preach about it, but you can go to the Bible. You can go to your religious text of choice. The Bible really deals with a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of prophecy dealing with Israel and the Middle East and how things would play out. And there are things that you could actually look and kind of measure. And, you know, it does seem like that's kind of the conflict that we're in. We don't want a modern day crusades, but who knows? Maybe that's what this is going to play out in the end. I don't know. We do have an existential crisis here. When you look at the immigration invasion going on in Europe and in the United States, bringing in the Islamic world into Europe, seeing the chaos that has ensued there is definitely this is becoming a conflict whether we want it to or not. And it is the fault of our own leadership that we have done this. So this may, in the end, become a religious and spiritual war, whether we want it to or not, because we've allowed the West to get compromised for years because of the mistakes that we made. And unfortunately, it is our own empathy and altruism that has also led to this, because we have been convinced at the end of the day, did our leaders make mistakes? Have our countries, the West, you know, the pinnacle of civilization, supposedly always the good guys, have we done terrible things throughout the world? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that we compromise our citizens and our way of life to repent for the sins of our past. Not at all. So we don't bring in people that don't believe in Western ideals, that don't want to integrate, that don't want to assimilate. We don't bring those people and people that hate our way of life into our country just because we feel bad about the things that our governments did in the past. No, we don't do that. That's foolish and ridiculous. What we do is we try to make sure that we don't get into these conflicts in the future. That's the best thing that we can do. Try not to repeat past mistakes, because this is the cycle that we're in. Instead, we're answering for the mistakes that we made in the past, and we're also committing cultural and political suicide by opening our borders and allowing people who hate us to come in and take over our societies. This is especially happening in Europe and the US. We're obviously allowing rampant immigration from South and Central America, but we are also allowing the Chinese and the Islamic extremists to exploit this as well. We have a fentanyl crisis that is going on. That is a war that we are going against the Chinese. The Chinese are killing the American populace through drugs. The cartels are helping them out. So we have immediate threats that are going on right now that we're not focusing on. And these are all things that will stretch us thin here, because that's the other thing. The border crisis is something else. We are stretched very thin right now. Can we save this situation? We can. The problem is there's going to be consequences no matter what. And this is also why you don't want a civil conflict in the United States, because the entire world is on a precipice. I can guarantee you the way that you'd want World War III to start is if the U.S. is lost. And this sucks. It really does, because this is the situation that we're in now, that we're kind of stuck with. We're stuck with everything that we've got, because as bad as the U.S. government may be and as compromised as we may be, the U.S. is still the only country in the world that's got most of its stuff together. And that is because of the American people. Because the American people we've seen people in Europe start to fight back, and they're starting to push back, but they do not have that spirit in them. The few that are there do not have the resources to be able to push these things back. It is the American people and not even all of us, it is a percentage of the American people that we believe in freedom, we believe in true justice, that we're awake to this stuff, that we will not be rolled over. We will prevent this stuff from happening. And that's really what it is up to. It is up to us to hold that banner of freedom, to elect people that will make a difference here, and to stand up against this stuff, because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. If our governments don't do anything, it's going to be up to us, the people, to take up the slack, because it'll get to the point where the governments become powerless, or they have so squandered their reputations that they have no authority, and they'll be demoralized. Because you have to think themselves, you can see in Europe the police forces that are going up against these Islamic riots, and they're not doing anything. The cops look scared, they look demoralized, and that's where we're going to, where we will be a society that has done so little to protect itself that we will be too afraid to defend ourselves. So, I think, we've got a chance, but we have to be aware of it. We have to wake up, and it'll take time to reverse everything that's gone on. But do we have a chance to save it? I think that we do. And I think we have to be optimistic, but we also have to be realistic. We have to pray. You have to. That's it. Like, some of this may be out of our control. We as individuals can't do anything about it. It may all be in place. So you got to pray for leadership, for yourself, for your family. Protect yourselves. I harp on this all the time, being prepared for things and all that stuff. Continue to do all that. That's all we can do. Control what you can control. So that's it. There's going to be a lot of bad information out there. It may be intentional propaganda. It may be governments going against each other, and we're caught in the crossfire because we don't want certain things to be compromised with our enemies or to show weakness. I don't know. Those are all the things that are going to happen. I think that we're in a rough position, and this is what we're looking at. And hopefully we don't end up in the world of Fallout, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So I'm going to put this on in the background. So the Fallout TV series, there's my segue right there. We talked about that for over an hour. I will easily be able to finish the show with Fallout talk the entire time. So for those of you that do not know, Amazon had created the Fallout TV series. Amazon has had I will say this. I'll just put it out there. In a world where we have seen franchises trashed, or we've seen wokeism injected in everything to an extreme level, where we've seen where we've seen poorly written shows, poorly produced shows, embarrassments when it comes to set design, special effects, acting, things like that. I will say that I think that Fallout is probably one of the best, especially video game based shows that we've ever seen. That's my personal opinion. That may be a bold statement for some people. I will try to defend it. I will go into where the pitfalls can be. I'm going to try not to be spoilerific, but I'm going to go through the characters. I'm going to go through some of the timeline of the show, and through some of the history of the video games and what I think about this. I do think it's a well-made show. I do think that it is, if we want to scale it on a scale of Fallout, it's better than Fallout 4. And it does a good story. Let's go through it as a show first, and then we'll talk about Fallout. Some of the things I like just randomly that I'm going to throw out there. So I think that the set design, the world building, the atmosphere was fantastic. It's spot on. If you end up playing the games, it takes the Fallout 4 aesthetic, which makes sense because that is the most modern game. The show takes place 10 years after the events of Fallout 4. Events of the video games aren't always alluded to, are alluded to, but not explicitly explained or gone over. Surprisingly and awesomely, I would say that Fallout 1 and 2, which is the game that most people probably have not played, created by Interplay in the 90s. They were isometric 3D, isometric sprite games that had excellent world building. They were hardcore RPGs. They really established the universe. It has a lot of allusions to the older games. I feel like the atmosphere draws a lot from the older games. Fallout is a very dark and fucked up universe. That's really, pardon my French, that's really the only way to describe it. But I do feel that, especially Fallout 4, Vault-Tec. Okay, so Vault-Tec is a corporation that created these vaults. Let's go through the basic story here of Fallout. For those of you that may know, I see a lot of people have never played the games. So I'll explain, kind of the 25,000 foot view of Fallout. So Fallout takes place in an alternate history timeline where after World War II, most of American history is the same up until World War II. After World War II, the microchip is never developed. So we don't get digital communications or anything like that. We have vacuum tubes that we had after World War II, and we have atomic energy. So, nuclear weapons. So the U.S. kind of remains in some ways technologically stagnant from a computer perspective, from a microchip perspective, but advances when it comes to nuclear power and even to some extent space exploration and energy and corporations. So we get advanced robotics, we do all this stuff, but everything is essentially analog. So we got nuclear power, analog computers, tube TVs, but we've got robotics, advanced power armor, portable nuclear reactors, and the like. And so the world goes on for about 120 years like this until the 2060s, when the U.S. and China go into, they're in a Cold War, because even though we do have nuclear power, there is no nuclear fusion. So uranium, fossil fuels are still used, and uranium is still a resource that is highly sought after, because even though nuclear reactors can power things for, 20, 30 years, you still need more uranium after that. Nuclear fusion has been partially developed here, but it's not necessarily that widespread. So we don't have the unlimited energy that we're talking about. That's like kind of the holy grail. So there are still resources that are fought over. The U.S. and China fight against each other for these natural resources, for uranium. In the 2060s, China invades the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. They do have internet. It's not the way that we look at it. There are communications like that. People do have portable computers and personal computers that they use. They're kind of like our 1970s computers in a lot of ways. So analog screens and kind of integrated like the Apple, like old Mac 2s and things like that. They have portable computers that you wear on your hand, almost like a big smartwatch, that are called Pip Boys, that are developed by Vault-Tec. So anyway, this is the world of the 2070s America. And throughout this time, there's a corporation, many corporations, some defense contractors, other, just basically, it's a hyper-capitalistic society. So think of the 1950s with the way the ads are, the way music is, the way that cars are, that retro style that has lasted up until this point. That is the culture that we have in the United States. Westerns are still a big deal. TV is still black and white, and Americana is on the menu. Communism is bad, and capitalism is good. And we see kind of a caricature of the United States as a hyper-capitalistic society. And ultimately, Fallout is a social commentary on the pitfalls of unrestricted capitalism, the military-industrial complex, and nuclear power and nuclear weapons. That's kind of what it is in a nutshell. And the human condition in and of itself, that humanity will always find a way to go to war. And that is the main premise of Fallout, which is war never changes. Humanity never does. We're always in conflict with one another. So this is kind of the world that they're in. Vault-Tec is a company that is building massive underground bunkers to basically live out the apocalypse, and they are trying to sell it to the public. So in the video games, in 2077, I forgot what the date was exactly, nobody knows who did it first. Now, I think the show kind of answered that question, but nobody knows whether the U.S. or China fired first. All that we know is that the nuclear war finally occurred, and within 2 hours, the exchange was over and the world has ended. And that's where we're at. So the survivors go into these bunkers, the vaults, and depending on which game you're playing, either 100 years later, 200 years later, these vaults open. And the story of the games is really of the people that emerge in the vaults, from the vaults, the vault dwellers, and how they interact with the outside world that survived the apocalypse, which they didn't think anyone would. The TV show, I will say this, the TV show will answer a lot of questions that if the video games did answer them, I didn't see them because they may have been buried in audio logs and things like that, because there's so much lore that is in audio and text logs in these games. Obviously, the first two games were mostly text-based, so there was some voice acting, but it was, games that were created in the late 90s. It was a point-and-click kind of turn-based game. So there you go. October 23rd, 2077. Thank you, Tim P. So that's kind of the story. So in Fallout 1, your vault dweller needed to come out of their vault because the water purification system in their vault failed. Somebody had to go to the surface and they had 150 days to try to find a new water chip to restore the water purification system in the vaults and allow the people to survive. You go out into the wilderness where you end up in a town called Shady Springs, which actually has massive significance to the Fallout story going forward and is a major story bit with Fallout New Vegas and even this Fallout TV show. So I will kind of throw that out there. So it comes full circle. And I think that they do a great job of really developing the original lore and expanding upon it in that regard. So each Fallout game deals with a different time period. Like I said, Fallout 1 introduces us to the vaults, to vault tech, things like that, kind of the world as it is 100 years after the bombs have dropped. Fallout 2 is the one that I know about the least, I'll be honest. I don't know what the story is with Fallout 2. They deal with the Enclave and things like that a lot more. The Enclave is essentially the remnants of the deep state after the Great War. They've set up their own bunkers and they have some control. There are different factions that have been set up throughout the wasteland, throughout history. They include the New California Republic, which is out of California, obviously, which is trying to emulate and rebuild the United States image and the original image of the U.S. You have the Brotherhood of Steel, which is a quasi-religious organization that uses the power armor and military technology of the past of 2077 to try to look for more artifacts and technology from the past to try to control the wasteland. You have the Children of Adam, who are cultists that worship radiation and they're completely irradiated. And then you have a lot of other factions. You have ghouls who are mutated humans who become zombies. Some of them are intelligent. They've kept their sentience. And so many of them are the survivors of the nuclear weapons. They've been alive for hundreds of years at this point. And then you have normal wastelanders, people that are just trying to survive, very much like Borderlands in that regard, or Mad Max type of world that we have. And so you've got a combination of makeshift weaponry too, built by these societies, and weapons that are left over from the past. Now, one of the major premises, and I'll throw this out there, of the games, is that as you play the games, you find out that a lot of these vaults were not initially set up just to be survival bunkers. Some of them had different twists on them. And they became almost isolated societies. So very much like BioShock. And I think that, so the games, obviously, especially Bethesda's games with the vaults and Vault Tech's mascot, Vault Boy, who I'm sure you've all seen, is very, cartoonish, very innocent, and, very corporate propaganda. And I think that that's, obviously that's intentional. And I think the video games have leaned heavily in on that. And you can kind of see here how it looks, that style. And so it's kind of leaned into that art style, very casual, very fun. And I think the games lean in on that. So I think the games tell a great story. Usually a lot of the story of the games is that really makes them fantastic is that atmospheric storytelling where you as a vault dweller are kind of exposed to vault tech in a positive light because your microcosm of a society has grown within this bubble where you're protected. You have all the resources you need to survive, and you're, isolated and insulated. So I think that, I think that sometimes in the games, at least for me, the vault tech humor and aesthetic kind of permeates things, and the games don't necessarily hit as dark as they should. And that's really where the side quests and side stories come in, where you'll be walking around in the world and you may find I remember I found an audio log that was a kid that ran away from home. And, so you find a child's skeleton and you find that he ran away from home because he got in trouble with his parents, and it happened to be on the night that on the day that the bombs dropped, and this kid got killed by the nuclear blast, and he was all alone in the wilderness. You'll find audio logs where you'll see two skeletons with guns pointed at each other, and you'll get the background of, a man who thought he was in love with a woman, and he was trying to get her to a bunker, but it turns out she was a corporate spy that wanted to take his information. And she didn't even care that the world was ending. She still wanted it, and she ended up shooting him. He shot her back, and they both died together in this bunker. You get more stories of the past of the military, of a Chinese submarine that was off the coast of Boston that fired the nukes at Boston, but somehow the submarine's captain survived and became a zombie, a ghoul, and has regrets here hundreds of years later over what he did. So you see all these stories, and that's really what builds the world and what shows what a tragedy it is, and the horrors of mutated animals, and even the horrors of vault tech itself, trying to create these vaults and using some of them for experimentation. And these are all things that you find within the game and some of the lore that you build up. But a lot of the questions are never answered. Each game is unique because they take place in different parts of the country and usually decades apart from one another in some cases. So it allows Bethesda to, because the country is so fractured at this point, there isn't one unifying faction or government. You can tell small stories in each location that are independent of one another without compromising future games. So I think it's interesting to see how Bethesda has been able to do that. And each game kind of leans in on that and doesn't lean into the others. So Bethesda, I should say, created Fallout 3. That's the first game they did. That takes place in Washington, D.C., in what's called the Capital Wasteland. And so some of the events that happen in that game do contribute to Fallout 4, especially with the Brotherhood of Steel. A young man is saved in that game. He eventually becomes the head of the Brotherhood of Steel that goes to the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is modern Massachusetts. And that's the location of Fallout 4. And you deal with different factions and things like that. And it's always interesting to see what contributed from the past is affecting the present in these games, and vice versa. What has been uncovered about the past that now the future is being decided by, or how have humans learned or not learned about what's been going on over the past few years. So I say this all to kind of go to the show and get to where we are, which is the show is 10 years after the events of Fallout 4. So another thing that Fallout has kind of done is that we don't know, especially when it comes to New Vegas and things like that, there are multiple endings to the Bethesda games, and we don't know which ones are canon. I think the show has kind of shown which ones are canon, showed which ones are canon now, as far as that, a little bit. I will say that. So you will find out more about where certain factions ended up after certain video games, and there's still more mystery involved as well, and deeper conspiracies to be told. So that goes without saying that we begin our journey In Vault 33, Lucy is our main character. I'll talk a little bit about the first episode, then kind of what the main plot line is, what I liked about the show. I can say that there's very few things that I disliked about the show. I'll be completely honest with it. I think that it is one of the best. As a Fallout fan, I love the show. As a video game show, I love the show. As a TV show, I love the show. I will say that. So I think it's fantastic. I'd give it high praise. I'd give it like a 9 or a 9.5 to be perfectly honest with you. I think it does a great job of respecting the lore, expanding upon the lore. It treats its characters well. It treats the audience well. I think it threads the needle, and this is something I said on Epic Verse the other day with Mike and Josiah and Ben, that I think it threads the needle of, if you don't know anything about the Fallout universe, you can come away and you'll enjoy the show and the characters and the world that it's in, the action, the atmosphere, the individual story. I think that if you're only a little bit into the lore, even better, because you'll pick up on even more. You'll recognize certain things. You'll be like, oh, hey, that's that thing that I saw there in the game or whatever. Or that's that gun, that I use in the video game. Or that's that location. Or look at that. Like that's a product, a cereal or something like that, because they do a great job with taking the things from the video games, like products that are used in the games, TV shows, the music that's used in the games, and the aesthetic overall, top notch, one of the best that's ever been made, in my opinion, of respecting the look of the source material. In the very beginning of the show, so because it is an RPG series, you have to choose your base traits when you create a new character in the show or in the games. And we're introduced to Lucy, and she has a sequence. And I think this serves two reasons, because obviously I think one of the things that we always see, and I think we fall victim to this all the time, and I can say it, is that because so many shows have been woke over the last few years, when we see certain types of characters, we're immediately, and it's a shame really, we're immediately taking it like, oh, female main character, a black main character, or a minority main character. Now, okay, they're going to make it woke. Don't walk into this show thinking that. I think Lucy is introduced in a great way. She says what her strengths and weaknesses are. If you know Fallout, she's actually going through her special, which is her base character traits. So she's actually describing her build as a character in this world, and that is awesome. And obviously in Fallout, you can choose to be male or female, so it's not a problem that she's a female character. I think they do a fantastic job of making her feminine, explaining how she can take care of herself, and her evolution as a character who is naive because she has spent her entire life underground in this vault, which is an idyllic utopian society where everyone helps one another, everything is provided, and moral values are very black and white. Yet she is aware that the world above is a bad place, and she's taught how to shoot weapons, hand-to-hand combat, things like that. And so that's kind of all explained, that she's not like a Mary Sue character that is perfect. So I think that they do a great job with that. So you're already like, okay, so she's not just going to be this I'm amazingly perfect character coming right away. We understand why she has some of the abilities that she's got. She's basically been trained, and yet she's still very much romantic. She wants to be married. She wants to be a wife. That's how she's been, and part of that is a function of the society that she's in. That's how she's been taught, but she's still very much, a woman. And even though she is a strong woman and she becomes a much stronger character by the end, I don't think that you're not beaten over the head with strong women at all, in my opinion. And I think, in fact, this show does a very good job of showing the diversity of America, because let's be honest, America is a diverse society. We have every color represented, and the show just kind of shows that that's how America was before and after the war, that, we're a racially diverse society. That's the truth. So you have good guys and bad guys that are of every sex and race, which is how it is. That's real life. So I think the show does a good job of portraying that anyone could be good, anyone could be bad. Most everyone is bad. because of the terrible society that you live in, this post-apocalyptic society. So I think that they do a great job with that. So Lucy is we can see her as our main character. She is by default, but we're also have the show is introduced with obviously the ending of the world. So we get to see the bombs dropping and the nukes going off. We're introduced to a character named Howard. I don't know if he's supposed to be Todd Howard's avatar within the in the world. So we have glimpses of the past through him. He's an actor in Westerns. And we find out more about what his significance is within the series and the things that he uncovered in the past, quote unquote, so in the 2070s, and that fills in the story of the present. So we get multiple arcs and storylines that are coming together. They respect the lore of the video games. They expand upon the lore of the video games in ways that make sense. And they answer questions from the video games that were not answered before, that were kind of inferred. But now we know the truth, and even now more questions are being asked, which is fantastic. It really does. They did describe the show as Fallout 5. It really does feel like it serves as Fallout 5. The way that the show is structured, it feels like a Fallout game in the sense of Lucy is going out on her quest to, basically the vault is attacked by raiders. Her father is kidnapped, and she's got to go find her father and leave the vault behind. So you figure in most Fallout games, that's kind of a story beat that we see. In Fallout 4, you're looking for your son that was kidnapped. In Fallout 3, you're looking for your father who left. In New Vegas, it's the only one. Well, yeah, New Vegas, you actually have nothing to do with the vaults. You're just some dude that's a survivor in the wasteland. And that's what makes New Vegas' story so unique, that it's detached kind of from the Vault Tech start, which is fantastic. New Vegas is going to have a huge, a lot of contributions to this show. I will say that because it takes place on the West Coast, and New Vegas was the most modern game that took place on the West Coast. The other games, Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 and 76, take place on the East Coast. So, we see all of that. We see all the threads coming together. It feels like a video gamey story in a good way, where Lucy's going on her quest. She's got different things. She uses her Pip-Boy to put waypoints and things like that. It shows like her health status. Everything is there. The way the computers work, they show computer hacking the way that it is. They show the mutated animals in the wasteland, the crazy characters that you run into that would be normally the NPCs, the settlements that you see with their craziness and vibrancy that you see in the wasteland. So it's just spot on. The way that people behave, the way that the things look, the feel of it all, the way things work, it's grounded in the universe and it respects it. And really what it does is it makes you so disappointed for Rings of Power, for Wheel of Time, for Halo, for all these other shows that have source material that is better than Fallout, that is more developed than Fallout in some ways, except for maybe Halo. And they couldn't do anything with it. And I think part of that is what makes this a good show. They respect you as the audience. They respect the source material. Could this become a Witcher? Look, I don't know if this can be a Witcher 2.0, because even Witcher 1.0 wasn't that great, if we're being honest with ourselves. It really wasn't that great. Henry Cavill did a great job, but we already kind of saw where that show is going. Here, they don't have to make this woke if they don't want to. I don't think so. And I don't even think it will be if the characters stay true to how they're behaving. Now, obviously, anything can be compromised and destroyed later on, but I think that the way that the characters get developed and the way the show works, they can do some really great things. So Halo, they destroyed it. This at least didn't try to remake one of the games, didn't try to do that. It's expanding on the canon in the future, and it is taking the information that's been given to us, and in some ways, information that now is saying, well, the video games told the truth. Everything is canon. But if you know something about the games, there will be certain events that are introduced through this show that relate, that you would think would have major consequences for some of the games, because of the times that supposedly certain things took place. But did they? What is the truth? What information is accurate? Were the games inaccurate in the way that some information was portrayed? Is the show lying about things? Is there more than meets the eye? These are some of the questions that we're going to be asking as the show goes on. So that's Lucy. We're introduced to her. She has a younger brother called Norm, who's our kind of small, reluctant guy that's not, physically unable to do stuff. He's afraid to get attacked by raiders. He stays behind. Lucy goes, looks for her dad. We're introduced to Maximus, who was a war orphan or a wasteland orphan, rescued and taken in by the Brotherhood of Steel and thrown into one of their boot camps in the hopes of eventually becoming a squire. Maximus is perhaps the most flawed and multifaceted, in a sense, character that most broken character that I've ever seen in a show, that is so human and broken in a way, and such a product of circumstance that that he has like no moral compass. He doesn't know what to do in this world, and is completely instinctual and sometimes driven completely by desire for power in a way, and trying to figure things out. And he's introduced as basically like the bottom of the totem pole at the Brotherhood of Steel, cleaning the bathrooms, things like that. And so we're introduced to him that way, and his desire to become a squire in the Brotherhood of Steel and eventually a knight, because he was saved by a knight in power armor when he was a child. So we see the lengths he'll take. He's being bullied all the time. So we see that he's even willing to maybe hurt somebody that he's a friend with to try to get their position, to get out of this place, to lift their station, to become a squire, go out into the wilderness, and to look for our big MacGuffin, which is this scientist that escaped the Enclave, which, well, where's the Enclave? We don't know. The Enclave survived Fallout 3. So this is another mystery that is given us there. This mysterious scientist and his mysterious dog, because it's not Fallout without a little bit of dog introduced into the game in one way or the other. So he's our big MacGuffin. He's who we're looking for. There's a bounty out for him. Eventually, Lucy runs into this guy too in her interactions in the wilderness multiple times. Our other character that we're introduced to is the Ghoul, who is basically, kind of a Western desperado enemy, immortal essentially, because he is a ghoul, a slingshot, or a gunslinger in the old vein, and a man with no morality or qualms about the world that he lives in, and killing anybody that gets in his way to find the answers that he is looking for from his unknown and dark past that will become known and even darker as the story goes on. So yes, the Enclave is in the West. Yeah. So Babyface P, there he goes. Should I need to know, should I watch Fallout? Yes, I think that you should. I think that if you're a fan of the games, even a little bit, I think that you'll like it. So I think I can heap a lot of praises for the show. I'm trying not to give spoilers, but I think it does a lot of great things. The story is good. I like the storyline. I like the twist. I like confirmation of certain things that you thought were happening in the games. They're now confirmed. Certain things are revealed for the first time ever that you had questions about the games. You get to find out, I think once and for all, you find out how the nuclear war got started, which is freaking awesome. You see more of the Vault-Tec lore expanded. You get to see the world as it is and the consequences of some of the things that may have happened in the video games. I'm sure that we'll get more definitive answers on which endings of New Vegas and Fallout 4 especially and even 3 were canon, because they've clearly decided which ones are canon, and it clearly contributes to this. The Brotherhood of Steel, for example, has the Prelude, or we assume it's the Prelude. It's not called the Prelude, which is their massive airship from Fallout 4. So were they building multiple Preludes? Is this the only one they've got? If the Prelude survives, then that tells us that the Brotherhood of Steel was the victor potentially of the story in Fallout 4, which means that the Syndicate, or not the Syndicate, the Institute was eliminated, and so was the Railroad, and the Brotherhood of Steel came out on top of that. So I don't know. So I would get that, and I wouldn't be that cynical, Willie. I think that we live in a world that is too cynical right now to not enjoy things, and I think that there's nothing wrong with enjoying. I think that as a standalone story that answers a lot of the questions from the lore, and being able to see the games that we know and love, and the story and the world that we know and love, seeing it portrayed, through live action, I think that alone is worth the price of admission. Would I be very disappointed if they took the show in a bad direction? Yes. But I think that it wraps up its own storyline and wraps up some of the other storylines and threads, and introduces enough intrigue and mystery that we want to know more about how the video games contributed to the world that we're seeing. I think it does an excellent job, and I think it's worth watching in that regard alone. And I think even if they mess it up, if we get one good season out of this, it will have contributed to Fallout positively. And I think that's the best praise that I can give it. So, and I won't be afraid to say that. I think that, and I'll be honest, look, I'll throw some of my own peers out there. I think a lot of people will be out there and they may talk crap about this show. And the only reason why they will be talking crap out of this is because there's such an incentive, especially in our space, to believe that everything that we see in the entertainment industry now is total shit. It's almost become the grift. Let's be honest. So giving something praise when they actually do a good job, even if it's made by people that we don't like, is very difficult. It's a very difficult pill to swallow, but that's not how I do business. I'm going to be honest with you if I like something, and I like the show. I like the show. Can they destroy it? Can they make us disappointed about it in the future? Is it a perfect show? No, I think it's some of the best adaptations of an IP that we've seen, and I think it has potential to be great if they wanted to. But I think this as a first effort was excellent. In some ways, I wish they hadn't released it all at once so that we could keep talking about it for a while. But you got to give credit where credit is due. And I think as bad as Amazon botched, obviously, their other franchises, we do have examples in Jack Reacher and in The Terminalist to show that they are capable of creating shows that respect the source material and that aren't afraid of pushing against agendas that the progressives and the left, or whoever you want to call them, the woke, wouldn't agree with. So I think I think that's important. And you know what? We have to give, if we want to see change in some ways, we not only have to create our own IPs, because we know that a lot of IPs have been destroyed by the entertainment industry, by the Disneys, by everybody else. But when an IP is respected, and when the companies listen to their fan base and they give the people what they want, we have to tell them that we have to give them the credit in good faith if we want to see the change. Because if all we do is complain all the time, and when they actually give us what we want, or if it seems like they're trying to move in that direction, potentially, if we want to see the change, then we have to give them the feedback. And the feedback that I would give Bethesda, Microsoft, and Amazon in this case is, I like this. This is what you need to do. Don't mess this up. Continue down this vein. The good things that you did here, continue those good things, expand upon them. Don't inject your woke politics into this. Just continue to make a good show, and guess what? You'll make a lot of money off of it, and the fans will reward you, and it will set an example to other IPs to do the same. That's what you need to do. Picard Season 3, another good example. It was too little too late. I thought Picard Season 3 was very good. It was a lot of fan service. It came too late to save Star Trek, but I give it credit. It was fantastic. I think it was great. I loved it. It respected the lore. It respected the characters, gave them a good send-off, And it was a much better effort than anything that Star Wars has given us. And I think that Fallout, and I'm going to give it this praise, I will. I think it's a good show regardless of whether we lived in the woke era where IPs were destroyed or not. I think Fallout would still be considered a good show. It's possible that for a lot of people, it will be considered a great show, or one of the best IP related shows by some people, because we do live in an era where the bar is so low. But I think if we were even in a time where we had good quality content created, we'd say like, yeah, Fallout did a good job. It's a good show. It's solid. And I like, again, it's not afraid to show character evolution and depth. There are times when you think it's going to fall under certain tropes and it doesn't. And it does a good job of getting out of that. Or you feel that, I think it does a great job of making the characters feel like they're video game characters, and a lot of times too, in their reactions to things. Like that they have reactions to how you as a player would be. So when Maximus gets in power armor for the first time and he feels that rush of power, that power trip going through him, or he does something cool in the armor, he acts like a giddy child, or like how we feel the first time that we have power armor and we start annihilating everything in the wasteland and we feel utterly invincible. But then also the vulnerability of when you run out of that fusion core and you don't have another one and you have to jump out and you realize that you did not equip yourself with enough Radaway and Rad-X, and you're in the middle of the glowing sea, your power armor is out of power, and you're just like, F my life, I am going to die of radiation poisoning. And so you know, that's where we're at. And so, yeah, I choose to enjoy it because, look, let's be honest too. I can see Willie. Exactly. Yeah, we can disagree about all this and we can talk about it. But I will say, Willie, don't allow yourself to be consumed by negativity all the time. Life is too short. We live in terrible times. We don't know what can happen in the world. Look at the things that we were talking about. Sometimes you have to take the moments that we've got and enjoy it, because I think that that's kind of a big message between even what Fallout is saying and what we're going through with. Fallout is kind of a social commentary of the world that we live in today, where you have major corporations that care about greed, that are contributing to the problems by selling weaponry and things like this, superpowers in conflict with one another, wars running amok. And so sometimes we have to look at where we're at and where we are and enjoy what we can, because you never know when it's going to be taken away. We live in very serious and dark times. And you got to take the good that you can while you can, because you may not have it. So that's really what you need to do. Logan, that's another thing too. Yes, there was like a non-binary character thrown in there and they didn't do anything. There weren't anything significant. I took it as more gay people and non-binary people exist in the United States today, so why would they not exist in a post-apocalyptic United States? It's true. Like sometimes you can't get nitpicky about certain things. If you throw in unrealistic expectations of things, then it's going to be unrealistic. But if you portray the population as it exists in the world today, like, you can't get mad about that, especially if they're not beating you over the head with it. And I think that's sometimes we get too caught up in it. We're like, we see something and we get triggered. And I think this is kind of a problem that we're having on our side, whatever you want to call it, the right, the libertarian, the freedom-minded side. I think we have gotten to the point too where we are easily gaslit, and it's, of course, it's like we have Stockholm syndrome. We've been held hostage by this stuff, but sometimes we're almost too fearful and we're too sensitive to everything that we see. And we've been becoming weaker and just as sensitive as the people that we make fun of in a lot of ways. And I think there's something to be said about that. You know, we watch satire and we can take multiple levels from it. We can play a game like Helldivers and know Helldivers is a satire in the world that we're in today. We don't get offended by it. That's even something that I saw within Fallout itself of, you know, fear of listening to things that may make you feel uncomfortable because, are you afraid because you're afraid of being screwed over, or are you afraid because you don't have the strength, the conviction in your beliefs, that you will not be compromised? And I think that is something that we as humans fall victim to sometimes. It's like, I don't even want to hear what somebody else has to say because I may be too reluctant to believe it. And Fallout even does this. Lucy as a character doesn't want to believe certain things about the world because she's lived in this vault, this idyllic, perfect society for so long. She doesn't want to believe that maybe there were nefarious origins to this world that she lives in, and that maybe the real world is the truth, and that the vaults are worse than the real world in their own ways, and that there's something more insidious going on. And I think it does a great job of doing that. So I think those are different things. So I think that's where we are. And I think, again, one of the strategies that is used against people is demoralization. And demoralization is sometimes a choice. We have to choose to be demoralized. We have to choose to feel the way that we do. And we have to allow them to take that away from us. There are stories of people that have been stripped of their freedoms and everything, but they sit in prisons and they have faith and they can never be destroyed or beaten, even if they are physically unable to do that. And that is the strength that we need right now, because we're not in that state yet. We still have our freedom. We still have our beliefs. We can still stand up to people. We can still let our word be out there. And that should give you optimism. That's what needs to give you strength, that we are still in a period of time where even if we believe that there are forces that are trying to be authoritarian and take away our freedom, we have an awareness of it so we can do something to prevent it. And that is spreading the word, waking other people up, or just saying, no, we're not going to fall victim to this. So that's kind of where we're at. So am I cynical in certain things? Sure. But at the same time, I think one of the things that I always do is I can have an awareness of the things that can happen, but you can't allow yourself to be consumed and overwhelmed by them. And part of that just comes from experiences of going through terrible things in life. That's what it is. Sometimes when you've got, and again, I'm not gonna use my personal stuff, but when your life has been shattered and the things that you always thought were true, or the things that you wanted for your life are no longer possible, the plans that you made, you've got to find the strength to go on. When you're in that despair, when you're alone and you've lost all faith, when you've been disappointed or betrayed by people that you trust, or let down, those are the times that you find strength, and that you have to move on, because it is so easy to be beaten down by the world or beaten down by people that have wronged you and want revenge or anger or all these things. I'm just speaking in generally, because I see so many people depressed or angry at the entire world. And I see, men and women in conflict with one another. And so much of it is because that's what they want from us. They want us to feel despair, to give up, to feel like we're alone. And you can't do that, because I can tell you, as somebody who's been there because of what's happened in my life, you can't let it consume you. You can always find a way out, because I'm here today because I was able to find that strength, and we can all do it. So have optimism. We can get through the other side. And if not, we do our best to get there together. So that is where we need to go. And that's what we need to try to do. Have strength in your convictions, have optimism in the fact that you have your voice. You're still able to talk today. You're not in the gulag yet. They have not taken everything away from us. We don't live in a post-apocalyptic society. It hasn't gone there yet. Because at the end of the day, too, even if we do believe that these things are going to happen, would you rather live in despair and dread, waiting for it to come, or make the best of what we have left? So that's kind of the way that you need to look at it. There's still a fight to be had. There's still time to save the world that we've got, and we can do it. And sometimes we just have to. You got to look for it yourself. And I can understand that if you've been beaten down I've had my moments of being beaten down. At the end of the day, we have control over we have only control over so much in our lives. So we got to make the choices of how we want to live them and how we allow the outside world to affect us to a certain extent. So that's what I got for today. I think Fallout was great. I think that it's an appropriate show for the world and the times that we live in. And I think that it was appropriate before, but I think more than ever, it says a lot. And I think if you have an interest in watching it, I don't think that you'll necessarily be disappointed. I don't. So especially if you go in looking at it as a game storyline. So not necessarily anything groundbreaking, but well done. So that's where we're at. So, love you guys. Love the back and forth. Love the discussion in the chat. Thank you so much for hanging out every day. We had a lot of people watching today. The views have been back and forth here. So again, I've been trying to decide what I want to do with this channel and this show in particular, trying to figure it out just because I go from gaming streams to commentary here. So, I'm kind of deciding what I want to do. Do I want to do more commentary and things like that? Trying to balance, what I do too. I stream less than I used to back in the day, and I enjoy kind of the flexibility that I have, but I also, enjoy doing this in a lot of cases and talking to you guys and interacting. So we'll see where we go. If not, just keep watching, Thursdays for the gaming streams. It seems like I'm a part of the Epic Verse crew there now. So you'll see me there at night on Thursdays. It seems like every week. And then Fridays, obviously the gaming streams. We got the old man into Helldivers now, which was actually a lot of fun. He did a great job. It doesn't matter what we try to do in Helldivers. We keep dominating in that game. So even the old man and his newbiness it hasn't brought us down. So I encourage you to go check that out. We had a lot of fun there. We'll be back in Fortnite at some point, I'm sure. But thank you all for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you for the support tonight from, of course, Greg the Goblin. Rocket Sauce comes in, dropping the 20 at the end. Having morals is a handicap that your enemies will use against you, but at the same time, having morals is what allows you to keep fighting. It is true. You cannot be naive, but you also can't lose your soul, because at the end of the day, if we all fall into depravity, was it worth it at the end if everybody ends up evil, bad, and cynical? That's the truth. What world do we want to live in at the end of the day? Is survival enough? Is survival worth it if you survive to compromise all of your values? Or is it better to die righteous and honorable? That's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. And that is a question that is the basis of a lot of morality. So that is a deep question that you need to look into your heart and see what is worth it to you. Obviously, I'd like to survive with morality, but if it's not an option, what is more important? So thank you again to everybody. To Greg the Goblin earlier for the 20, Ad Victorium for the 5, Alec Baldwin's Finger for the $40, Cerberus for the 10 gifted subs, and Rocket Sauce for the 20 to end the show. You guys are incredible. I appreciate all of you. I'm always humbled. And I will catch you on the next one. Be back next Sunday right here at 7 p.m. for episode 14. And yeah, we'll keep talking. Stay tuned throughout the week. Good luck and God bless. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-dum-bum, ba-da-ba-bum.
Do not come. Do not.
I'm gonna come.